Ahoy there, mates! Welcome aboard the VHS pirate ship and welcome to REEK of the Week! The little show where I take a break from talking about movies and VHS tapes and examine certain aspects of 80s and 90s nostalgia. Yes, it has the sweet stench of childhood memories and is ripe with retrospective. It's the show you can smell. It's REEK of the Week! And we're kicking off JimVarney June by talking about Ernest merchandise. Yes, Ernest P. Worrell, the advertising juggernaut, the marketing powerhouse that became a pop culture icon that's still beloved to this day. At the very peak of this character's popularity, he was everywhere, and I remember as a kid playing with all the Ernest action figures and toys and video games. Oh, that's right, there wasn't any! Well, at least nothing really substantial. There was the talking Ernest doll from the Hey Ernest television show, which was released by Kenner in 1989. And this was cool and all, but was it really good enough? And why is his name on his shirt? Like he's one of the Penguin's henchmen. And the talking Ernest doll is the best and basically only example of an Ernest toy. The Hey Ernest Saturday morning television show should have been more of a marketing bonanza than it was. It was pretty popular, even though it didn't last very long, and there should have been more merchandise for it than what we got, especially considering that the show was loaded with characters, including 2 actual puppets that would have made actual good toys. Yeah, you had Dust Bunny, which would have made a great hand puppet because basically that's what it was. Then you had Woody, the Ernest ventriloquist dummy. They would have made good toys and more than likely would have sold fairly well, and I just don't know why more effort wasn't put into merchandising Ernest stuff. It's surprising that there wasn't, considering that the Ernest character was born to do marketing and was an advertising vessel. As we all know, the character of Ernest was created to do commercials and was derived from that aspect. So it's weird, given that he's a marketing icon, that there wasn't more of a market for him. I mean, there really was plenty of tangible merchandising opportunities, especially with all the Ernest movies, but nothing was really seized upon. I mean, we got an Ernest Goes to Camp book and tape, but oh boy, that's a lot of fun. Hey man, you want to come over this weekend and play with my Ernest Goes to Camp book and tape? Well, this was pretty neat. I mean, it did have Ernest himself reading the story, so that's pretty cool. But really, as far as any other kind of merchandising for Ernest Goes to Camp, or any Ernest movie for that matter goes, this was it. There wasn't even anything for Ernest Scared Stupid, possibly the most marketable movie of all the Ernest movies. Even though, in my opinion, it's one of the worst Ernest movies, but it would have made great action figures, that's all I'm saying. It could have had the trolls, all the different variations of Ernest, the Ernest dump truck as some kind of battle wagon, the treehouse playset. I mean, the possibilities for this were basically endless. Well, not dump truck, garbage truck. You know what I mean. And Ernest Goes to Jail would have made great action figures too. Come on, an action figure for Electro Man would have been awesome. They could have had a figure for Nash, Lyle, and just look at the guards. They just scream, hey, make an action figure out of me. They could have had Chuck and Bobby figures, and they could have come with that van they had. I mean, the possibilities, once again, were endless. Now, I typically don't make a fuss over such things because, hey, sometimes they just don't make action figures for everything. Or at least I would be that way if they didn't make action figures for everything. Yeah, through the late 70s and into the early 90s, there was a time when there was an action figure line for basically anything that existed. I mean, they had Love Boat toys, for heaven's sakes. I bet you couldn't wait to get your hands on the Sequest action figures. It's just strange that there was no Ernest toys, even though there was plenty of other toy lines that just didn't make any sense. Ernest action figures would have made sense. The closest thing we got was an Ernest miniature Gumball machine. And by closest thing we got, I mean farthest away possible. Yes, there was an Ernest P. Worrell miniature Gumball machine. Yes, technically this is an Ernest toy, but a really lame one. And it might be really lame, it's also really rare. I mean, really rare. Very rare. Extremely rare. Extraordinarily rare. So much so, in fact, there isn't any information about this that exists right now. There are absolutely 0 current eBay listings for this, and there's not even any pictures. Hell, I had to get this picture from a thumbnail from Ernest Goes to Podcast. And by the way, if you haven't checked that channel out, do so. It's really cool. The Ernest miniature Gumball machine is basically an enigma, so we're gonna move on. Okay, so we never got any proper Ernest toys, but there were other forms of Ernest merchandise, but even those were few and far between. There was the Ernest P. Worrell Book of Knowledge, which was published in 1985 and would go on to be one of the greatest coffee table books to ever exist. My parents had this when I was a little kid, and I've been in love with this ever since. It's just a great book. It's filled with funny lists, funny jokes, funny pictures. I mean, if you haven't seen this, check it out, but good luck finding one. Not too many current listings for it, and they go for some pretty steep prices. In the mid-'80s, there were other bits of Ernest merchandise, but not very many. There were Ernest bumper stickers and buttons and other things of that like, and these were only available through the Ernest P. World fan club. There was also an Ernest Halloween mask. I mean, look at that thing. That's sort of terrifying. Terrifying or not, this did exist. However, it doesn't seem like it does anymore. Yep, no current listings for this, but that's okay because I don't know about you, but I have a huge problem owning used Halloween masks. Come on, someone's big greasy head was in this. I don't want it. Now, Ernest, being a marketing vessel for other companies, would have promotional items that featured his likeness. So yes, there was Ernest merchandise that wasn't technically Ernest merchandise, if you know what I mean. The deal with the Ernest character is that he would do commercials for regional markets, companies that were not on a national scale, at least for the most part. He would do commercials for Coca-Cola products, mainly Sprite and Mellow Yellow. But his main claim to fame was doing commercials for local dairies, local television and radio stations, local car dealerships, local grocery stores, stuff like that. That being the case, these local companies would have promotional items that featured his likeness. And these said items are far too various and numerous to even tell you what they are. But they would be in the form of your common promotional fare, like t-shirts and buttons and whatnot. But there would be the occasional oddball thing, like this little piggy bank from a gas company. And Sprite would also get in the game and have their own promotional Ernest merchandise. But any of this stuff is extremely hard to find. You never know what listing's gonna pop up where, and I mean, if you collect this stuff, all I can really tell you is just keep your eyes open. Most of these Ernest promotional items were made for local markets, which means they didn't make a lot of them. And that translates to there's even less of them today. So the items that do exist and do have listings for them, they basically get bought up right away. Ernest merchandise is a hot commodity nowadays. If you see a listing for something and you want it, you better have the money to pay for it right then because it won't be there when you come back to it. And trust me, none of this stuff is cheap. People are very much aware of what they have. Ernest stuff is pretty rare, which just seems to add to the character's curious mystique. All in all, there was Ernest merchandise, but not nearly enough as there should have been. It was all loaded with potential, and it was never realized. That's just really weird to me. It raises a lot of questions, like in the long history of toy lines, how come we never got anything for Ernest, but we did get a toy line for MASH? And I'm sure all the kids were just clamoring to play with the Welcome Back Kotter action figures. Also, how come there were never any Ernest trading cards? They made trading cards for everything. They made them for Growing Pains and Dallas, for heaven's sakes. How come there was never any Ernest Pez dispensers? That's a treasure trove right there. Yeah, you could have had Ernest, Dr. Otto, Auntie Nelda, Slave Willie, just to name a few. Why was there never an Ernest pinball table? There wasn't even one of those crappy little tabletop ones in which they made one for everything. And why on earth was there never a video game for Ernest Scared Stupid? But let's be honest, if there was, Ocean probably would have made it and it would have sucked. I don't know. It's all armchair marketing, I guess, and maybe there's good reasons why none of this stuff existed. I don't know. And this episode of REEK of the Week was really more about what should have been instead of what is. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed it all the same. Be sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned right here to Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship as JimVarney June continues. Yes, the month-long tribute to the man himself rolls on, and be sure to give Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship on Facebook a like for plenty of JimVarney posts. Well, until next time, me hearties, take care out there, know what I mean, and I'll see you next time only on Captain Adam's VHS Pirate Ship.